Commander Zirveth stood at the observation deck of his warship and watched the human vessel approach. The ship was small compared to Kelthari destroyers. It had smooth lines and soft edges. It looked like something built for comfort, not conquest. He felt a wave of disappointment wash over him. The Kelthari Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the last 100 cycles. They had crushed species that breathed fire. They had defeated creatures made of living metal. They had brought entire civilizations to their knees with nothing but discipline and strength. Zirveth himself had killed over 300 enemies in personal combat. His body carried the scars of a lifetime of war, and each scar was a mark of honor. Now he was being sent on a diplomatic mission. The High Council wanted to learn about these newly discovered creatures called humans. They wanted to understand their culture before deciding whether to conquer them or ignore them. Zirveth thought it was a waste of time. One look at their soft little ship told him everything he needed to know. "The humans are requesting permission to dock," said Sub-Commander Threlnak. He was younger than Zirveth, but just as deadly. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he read the transmission. "They say they have prepared entertainment for us." "Entertainment?" Zirveth repeated. The word felt strange in his mouth. The Kelthari did not have entertainment. They had training. They had combat. They had meditation before battle. The concept of doing something simply for pleasure was foreign to their culture. "Perhaps they will show us their mating dances," one of the warriors said. The others made sounds of amusement. Zirveth silenced them with a look. "We will observe and report. Nothing more. The High Council wants information, and we will provide it." The human ship connected to their docking port with a soft click. The Kelthari warriors gathered in the receiving bay, all 7 of them standing in perfect formation. They wore their ceremonial armor, which was really just their battle armor polished to a shine. Each of them stood over 7 feet tall. Their skin was dark purple, thick as leather, and covered in natural ridges that could deflect blade strikes. Their 4 eyes allowed them to see in all directions at once. Their hands had 6 fingers each, all ending in claws that could tear through steel. The airlock opened, and the humans stepped through. Zirveth felt his primary heart skip a beat. Not from fear, but from confusion. The humans were small. The tallest among them barely reached his chest. Their skin was soft and came in various light shades. They had only 2 eyes, placed on the front of their face like prey animals. They had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons of any kind. They looked like something the Kelthari would hunt for sport, but they were smiling. All of them. Wide, toothy smiles that showed no fear at all. The one in front stepped forward. He had short brown hair and eyes the color of a dying star. He extended his hand toward Zirveth. "Commander Zirveth, I presume. I'm Captain Jake Morrison. Welcome aboard the Horizon's Edge." Zirveth had been briefed on human customs. He knew about the handshake. He reached out and took the human's tiny hand in his massive grip. Intending to show dominance through strength, the human squeezed back, hard. Zirveth blinked all 4 eyes. The grip was strong, much stronger than he had expected. He looked down at the human's arm and saw muscles moving beneath the soft skin. There was power there. Hidden power. "Strong grip," Zirveth said. Jake Morrison just smiled wider. "Thanks. I work out." A female human stepped forward next. She had golden hair tied back behind her head and eyes like a clear sky. Her smile was warm and welcoming. "I'm Lieutenant Katie Sullivan, your cultural liaison. I'll be showing you around and answering any questions you might have about human customs." Zirveth studied her. She was even smaller than the captain, but she stood with confidence. She met his 4-eyed gaze without flinching. Most species looked away when Kelthari warriors stared at them. This small female did not. "You said you prepared entertainment," Zirveth said. "What does this mean?" Katie and Jake exchanged a look. There was something in that look. Something Zirveth could not identify. It almost looked like excitement. "We thought you might like to see how humans test themselves," Katie said. "How we challenge each other. How we compete." "Compete?" Threlnak asked. "You mean combat?" "Something like that," Jake said. We call it the Ultimate Fighting Championship. It's one of our most popular forms of entertainment. Zirveth felt a flicker of interest. Combat entertainment. Perhaps these humans were not as soft as they appeared. Perhaps they forced criminals to fight for the amusement of the masses. The Kelthari had done something similar in ancient times, before they evolved beyond such barbaric practices. These fighters, Zirveth said carefully. They are prisoners? Slaves forced to battle? Katie laughed. It was a light sound. Musical almost. But there was something underneath it. Something sharp. No, Commander, these are athletes. They train their whole lives for the chance to fight. They volunteer. They beg for the opportunity. Zirveth felt a cold sensation in his secondary heart. They beg to fight? Oh yes, Jake said. His smile had not faded. If anything, it had grown wider. Fighting is in our blood, Commander. It always has been. The difference is, we've learned to channel it, to control it, to make it into something beautiful. He gestured toward the corridor leading into the ship. Shall we? The main event starts in an hour, and you won't want to miss it. I promise you, Commander. You've never seen anything quite like what humans do to each other when we compete. Zirveth nodded slowly and followed the humans into their ship. Behind him, his warriors fell into formation. They were still confident, still proud. They had conquered 17 star systems, after all. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The corridor was wide and well lit. The walls were decorated with images of humans engaged in various activities. Some showed humans running across open fields. Others showed them throwing objects or jumping over obstacles. Many showed them fighting. Zirveth paused at one image. It showed two humans locked together, their bodies twisted in a complicated hold. Both of them were bleeding. Both of them were smiling. That's from last year's championship, Katie said, noticing his interest. Great fight. Went all 5 rounds. Rounds? Time periods. Each fight is divided into rounds. The fighters keep going until one of them can't continue, or until the judges decide a winner. Zirveth stared at the image for a long moment. There was something in those human faces, something he had seen before in the eyes of cornered prey. But these humans were not cornered. They were not fighting for their lives. They were fighting because they wanted to. The cold sensation in his secondary heart grew stronger. The viewing room was large and comfortable. Soft chairs had been arranged in rows facing a massive screen that covered the entire wall. The lights were dim, creating a feeling of intimacy that made Zirveth uncomfortable. Kelthari warriors did not sit in soft chairs in dark rooms. They stood at attention in bright light where threats could be seen and eliminated. But this was a diplomatic mission, so he sat. His warriors spread out around him, each one trying to fold their large bodies into the human-sized furniture. Sub-Commander Threlnok sat to his right, his 4 eyes scanning the room for danger out of pure habit. The other 5 warriors positioned themselves near the exits, as they had been trained to do. The human crew members seemed completely relaxed. Chief Engineer Danny Carter, a thick man with hands like stone blocks, was adjusting something on a control panel near the screen. Medical Officer Amy Brooks, a small female with dark skin and bright eyes, was carrying large containers filled with something white and fluffy. Popcorn, she offered, holding a container toward Zirveth. He stared at it. What is this substance? It's a snack. Heated grain that expands and becomes light and crunchy. Humans eat it while watching entertainment. You eat while watching combat? Amy shrugged. Sure. Want some? Zirveth declined. Eating during combat observation seemed disrespectful to the fighters. But he noticed that every human in the room took handfuls of the white substance and put it in their mouths without any concern. Navigation Officer Chris Palmer dropped into a chair nearby, his feet propped up on another chair in front of him. He held a metal container that hissed when he opened it. Beer, he explained when he noticed Zirveth watching. Fermented grain beverage. Makes everything more fun. Threlnok leaned close to Zirveth. They consume intoxicants before watching combat. This is strange behavior. Zirveth agreed but said nothing. He was here to observe, not judge. The screen flickered to life. Loud music filled the room, deep and rhythmic, like the beating of a war drum. Images flashed across the screen showing human faces twisted in rage, fists flying, bodies colliding. Text appeared in the human language, which Zirveth's translator interpreted as Ultimate Fighting Championship. Battle for Glory. Here we go, Danny said, settling into his chair with obvious excitement. The screen showed a massive arena filled with humans. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. They were all standing. All shouting. All waving their arms in the air. The noise was incredible, even through the screen. It sounded like the roar of a dying star. In the center of the arena stood a structure that made Zirveth lean forward. It was a cage. 8-sided, made of metal mesh, with a single door for entry and exit. Inside the cage, 2 figures stood on opposite sides, bouncing on their feet and rolling their shoulders. "What is that structure?" Zirveth asked. "The octagon," Katie said. She had taken a seat nearby, close enough to answer questions. "It's where the fighters compete. Once they go in, they don't come out until the fight is over. It looks like a prison cell. Some people call it that. The fighters call it home." Zirveth studied the 2 humans in the cage. They wore almost nothing. Small shorts that covered their lower bodies, thin gloves on their hands, and nothing else. No armor, no helmets, no protection of any kind. One fighter was large for a human, with pale skin covered in colorful markings that Zirveth learned were called tattoos. The other was smaller but more muscular, with brown skin and a shaved head that gleamed under the lights. "These fighters," Threlnok said slowly, "they wear no protection. They carry no weapons." "They don't need weapons," Amy said through a mouthful of popcorn. "They are the weapons." A human in formal clothing stood in the center of the cage, speaking into a device that amplified his voice. He announced the names of the fighters, their records, and their fighting styles. The crowd screamed louder with each word. Then the announcer left the cage. The door was sealed shut. The 2 fighters approached the center. They touched their gloved hands together briefly. A gesture of respect, perhaps, or maybe a promise of violence. A bell rang. What happened next made Zirveth's blood run cold. The 2 humans exploded toward each other with a speed and ferocity that seemed impossible for their small bodies. The larger fighter threw a punch that whistled through the air. The smaller one ducked under it and drove his fist into the other's stomach. The sound of impact was audible even through the screen. The larger fighter absorbed the blow without slowing down. He grabbed his opponent and threw him against the cage wall. The mesh rattled. The crowd screamed. The smaller fighter pushed off the wall and launched his knee directly into the larger one's face. Blood sprayed across the floor of the cage. Threlnok made a sound that Zirveth had never heard him make before. Something between a gasp and a whimper. "First blood," Chris said casually, taking a sip of his drink. "Nice knee strike." The larger fighter staggered but did not fall. Blood poured from his nose, running down his chin and dripping onto his chest. He smiled. He actually smiled, showing teeth stained red with his own blood. Then he attacked again. The 2 humans became a blur of violence. Punches, kicks, elbows, knees. They used every part of their bodies as weapons. When one was knocked down, he would immediately try to pull the other down with him, turning the fight into a ground battle where they twisted around each other like mating serpents. The smaller fighter managed to wrap his legs around the larger one's neck. He squeezed. The larger fighter's face turned red, then purple. His eyes bulged. His hands clawed at the legs, crushing his throat. "He's going to kill him," one of the Kelthari warriors said. "He's not going to kill him," Katie said calmly. "He's going to choke him unconscious. It's called a rear naked choke. Very effective. He can surrender," Danny added. "All he has to do is tap out. Tap his hand on the ground, and it's over." But the larger fighter did not tap. Even as his face turned a deeper shade of purple, even as his movements became weak and uncoordinated, he refused to surrender. Instead, he kept throwing punches, weak punches, desperate punches, but punches nonetheless. Finally, his body went limp. His eyes rolled back in his head. His arms fell to the floor. The referee rushed in and pulled the fighters apart. Medical personnel entered the cage. The crowd erupted in cheers, so loud that the screen seemed to shake. "Good fight," Amy said, nodding approvingly. "Lot of heart from the big guy. Refused to quit, right until the end." Zirveth sat in silence. His 4 eyes were wide. His 2 hearts were beating in strange, uneven rhythms. Beside him, Threlnak had gone very still. They had just watched a human nearly die. And everyone around them was celebrating. "That was the undercard," Katie said with a smile that seemed somehow dangerous. "The main event is coming up next. Those fighters are much better." Zirveth wanted to ask what could possibly be better than what he had just witnessed, but his translator had stopped working. No. His translator was fine. His voice was the problem. He could not speak. The break between fights lasted only a few minutes, but to Zirveth, it felt like hours. He sat frozen in his chair, his mind trying to process what he had witnessed. Beside him, Threlnak had not moved either. The other Kelthari warriors were shifting uncomfortably in their seats, exchanging glances that spoke of shared unease. The humans, meanwhile, were laughing and chatting as if nothing unusual had happened. Amy was refilling her popcorn container. Chris had opened another beer. Danny was explaining something technical about the previous fight to Katie, using words like takedown defense and ground game that the translator struggled to interpret. "You okay there, Commander?" Jake asked. The captain had appeared beside Zirveth without making a sound. For such a small creature, he moved very quietly. "I am processing," Zirveth said. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Thin, uncertain, understandable. "First time watching UFC can be intense." Jake smiled. That warm smile that somehow felt cold. "But don't worry. You get used to it. Humans have been fighting for fun since we lived in caves. It's in our nature." "For fun," Zirveth repeated. "You do this for fun. Well, for glory too. And money. These fighters make millions of credits for a single fight. They're celebrities on Earth. Kids put posters of them on their walls. They're heroes." Ah, heroes. The Kelthari had heroes too. Warriors who died gloriously in battle against real enemies. Warriors who sacrificed themselves for their people. Not warriors who beat each other bloody for the amusement of screaming crowds. The screen lit up again. New music. New images of violence. The crowd in the arena was even louder than before. "Main event time," Chris said, rubbing his hands together eagerly. "This is going to be brutal." 2 new fighters entered the cage. Both were covered in scars. Both moved with the fluid grace of predators. Both had eyes that were completely empty of fear. The fighter on the left was a female. Threlnak made a choking sound. "The female will fight?" "That's right," Katie said. "This is a women's championship bout. The current champion versus the #1 contender. They've been talking trash to each other for months. This one's personal. Your females engage in combat," Zirveth said. It was not a question. Of course. Equality means equal opportunity to beat each other up. Katie's tone was light. But her eyes were not. "Human women have always been fighters, Commander. We just weren't always allowed to show it." The 2 female fighters touched gloves. The bell rang. And Zirveth discovered that human females were just as terrifying as human males. The champion was faster. Her punches snapped out like striking serpents, hitting her opponent again and again. But the challenger was tougher. She absorbed the blows and kept coming forward, waiting for her moment. That moment came in the second round. The champion threw a kick that the challenger caught in midair. In one smooth motion, the challenger swept the champion's supporting leg and drove her to the ground. They landed hard. The challenger immediately began raining down elbows on the champion's face. The sound was sickening. Wet thuds mixed with the crowd's roaring approval. Blood splattered across the white floor of the cage. The champion tried to cover her face, tried to escape, but the challenger was relentless. "Get out of there," Danny shouted at the screen. "Move your head. Roll." He was giving advice, as if this were a game. as if the woman being beaten was not in danger of dying. The referee stepped in and separated the fighters. The champion's face was a mask of blood. Her left eye was swollen shut. A cut on her forehead was pouring crimson down her features. The medical staff examined her quickly. Then, impossibly, they let her continue. "She's injured," Zirveth said. "Why do they not stop the contest? She can still fight," Amy said simply. The doctor cleared her. "As long as she can defend herself, the fight goes on." "But her eye, she's got another one." Zirveth stared at the medical officer. She had said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, as if losing the use of an eye was a minor inconvenience. The fight continued. The champion, despite her injuries, came out aggressive in the third round. She was losing, and she knew it. Her only chance was to finish the fight before the judges made their decision. She threw everything she had at the challenger. Wild punches, desperate kicks. She fought like an animal backed into a corner. Except this animal had chosen to enter the corner voluntarily. The challenger stayed calm. She blocked and dodged and waited. And when the champion overextended on a punch, the challenger countered with a knee strike that connected directly with the champion's jaw. The sound was like a tree branch snapping. The champion's head jerked sideways at an unnatural angle. Her body went stiff, then collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. She hit the ground and did not move. Silence in the arena, silence in the viewing room. Then the crowd exploded. Humans leaped to their feet, screaming and embracing each other. The challenger fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Her bloody fists raised toward the sky. On the ground, the former champion lay motionless. Medical staff rushed into the cage with equipment and stretchers. "Is she dead?" one of the Kelthari warriors whispered. "Knocked out," Chris said. "Probably a concussion. She'll be fine in a few weeks." A few weeks. She would be fine in a few weeks. After being struck so hard that her brain had shut down to protect itself. Zirveth noticed something on the screen that made his four hearts freeze simultaneously. The camera had found a human family in the crowd. A male, a female, and a small child. The child was perhaps 5 or 6 cycles old, with painted cheeks and a tiny shirt bearing the image of one of the fighters. The child was cheering, pumping small fists in the air, screaming with joy. They brought their offspring to witness this. They raised their young watching violence. They taught their children to celebrate the destruction of bodies. Zirveth finally understood something that had confused him since boarding this ship. The humans were not soft. They were not weak. They were not harmless prey animals who had stumbled into space. They were predators. They were predators who had evolved to hide their nature behind soft skin and friendly smiles. Predators who had learned to contain their violence, to channel it, to make it into sport and entertainment. But underneath those smiles, underneath that soft exterior, lived something ancient and terrible. Something that fought for pleasure. Something that embraced pain. Something that refused to surrender, even when surrender was the only logical option. The Kelthari had conquered 17 star systems because they were better warriors than the species they encountered. But Zirveth was beginning to realize that the Kelthari were warriors because they had to be. Humans were warriors because they chose to be. And that difference was everything. "You okay, Commander?" Katie asked. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes held something that might have been amusement, or might have been warning. "You look a little pale. Well, paler than usual. Can you turn pale?" "I'm not sure how Kelthari biology works. I require a moment," Zirveth said. His voice was barely a whisper. "To process. Take your time. We have 2 more fights on the card. 2 more. 2 more exhibitions of willing violence. 2 more demonstrations of human savagery disguised as sport." Zirveth sat back in his chair and tried to remember the last time he had felt fear. He could not remember because he had never truly felt it before. He felt it now. Sub-Commander Threll Nack rose from his seat during the third fight. His movement was stiff, mechanical, like a machine that had forgotten how to function properly. "I require medical attention," he announced. His voice was flat, empty. "My digestive system is experiencing disturbance." Amy looked at him with concern. "Do you need me to examine you?" "No. I will return to our vessel. Our medical systems are more suited to Kelthari biology. He walked toward the exit without waiting for permission. Two other Kelthari warriors followed him, their faces carefully blank, their four eyes fixed straight ahead. None of them looked at the screen where two humans were currently trying to break each other's limbs. Zervath did not stop them. He understood. They had reached their limit. Honestly, he was impressed they had lasted this long. 4 Kelthari warriors remained. The elite of the elite. Warriors who had witnessed horrors across 17 conquered worlds. They sat in their chairs like statues, their eyes fixed on the screen, their bodies completely still. The fourth fight was the worst. It was a rematch between two fighters who clearly hated each other. They had fought before, and the first fight had ended in controversy. Now, they were back to settle the score. From the opening bell, it was clear this would be different. These fighters were not just competing. They were trying to hurt each other. Truly hurt each other. Every punch was thrown with the intention to damage. Every kick was aimed at vulnerable spots. Every grapple was designed to cause maximum pain. Halfway through the second round, one fighter caught the other's arm and twisted it backward. The sound of the elbow dislocating was clearly audible. The injured fighter screamed. It was a raw sound, primal and horrible, but he did not surrender. "Tap out," Danny muttered. "Come on, man. Tap out. Your arm is done." The injured fighter managed to escape the hold. His arm hung uselessly at his side, clearly broken. The joint bent at an angle that made Zervath's stomach lurch. But he stayed standing. He raised his one good arm and motioned for his opponent to come forward. "He continues?" Zervath heard himself say. "His limb is destroyed. Why does he continue?" Sergeant Ben Torres had joined them at some point. He was a compact human with scars on his knuckles and a calm demeanor that spoke of personal experience with violence. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. "Because he's got heart, Commander." "Heart? What does the blood-pumping organ have to do with combat endurance?" "It's an expression. Having heart means having courage. Spirit. The refusal to give up even when everything says you should. It's a human quality. Maybe our best quality. Or your most insane quality," muttered one of the remaining Kelthari warriors. No one corrected him. The fight continued. The injured fighter, operating with only one functional arm, managed to last 2 more rounds through sheer determination. He lost the decision. Of course, he had been completely outclassed. But when the verdict was announced, both fighters embraced in the center of the cage. They had been trying to destroy each other moments ago. Now they hugged like brothers. "What is happening?" Zervath asked. They were enemies. They were engaged in mortal combat. Now they embrace? Zervath Askin Philly. They were enemy. Respect, Katie explained. They pushed each other to their limits. They brought out the best in each other. That creates a bond. In the cage, they're enemies. Outside the cage, they're part of the same brotherhood. You have a brotherhood of violence. We have several, actually. Boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai. The list goes on. Katie smiled. Humans have been inventing ways to hurt each other since the beginning of our species. It's kind of our thing. Zervath thought about this. The Kelthari fought because their culture demanded it. They fought for empire, for resources, for survival. Violence was a tool, a means to an end. Humans seem to view violence as an end in itself, a form of expression, a way of connecting with each other. It was insane. Completely, utterly insane. And terrifying. The fifth and final fight began. It was meant to be the highlight of the evening. 2 champions from different weight classes had agreed to meet in a special exhibition match. The entire galaxy, apparently, had been anticipating this event. From the first exchange, Zervath knew this fight was different. These 2 fighters were operating on a level he had not seen before. Their movements were precise, efficient, almost beautiful in their deadliness. They attacked and defended in fluid sequences that seemed choreographed but clearly were not. The larger fighter landed a spinning kick that connected with his opponent's temple. The smaller fighter's head snapped sideways. His body crumpled. He fell to the canvas like a sack of stones, The referee started counting. The medical staff prepared to enter. Then, impossibly, the fallen fighter opened his eyes. He blinked once, twice, and then he started pushing himself up from the floor. "Stay down," Zirveth whispered. He did not realize he had spoken aloud until the humans looked at him. "Your brain has been damaged. Stay down." But the fighter did not stay down. He rose on shaky legs, his eyes unfocused, his body swaying. The referee examined him quickly and allowed the fight to continue. "He should not be standing," one of the Kelthari warriors said. His voice was barely audible. "No creature should be standing after such a blow." "Human skulls are pretty thick," Ben said with a shrug. "Our ancestors survived by taking hits that would kill other animals. Evolution made us tough. This is not toughness. This is something else. Maybe. We don't really have a word for it. Stubbornness. Maybe. Or spite. Humans will sometimes keep going purely out of spite. To prove a point, to show that we can't be beaten, even when we clearly have been." The fight ended shortly after. The larger fighter secured a chokehold, and this time, the smaller fighter had no choice but to tap out. He had nothing left to give, but as he lay on the canvas, gasping for breath, blood leaking from cuts on his face, he raised one hand to the crowd, and the crowd responded with a roar of appreciation that shook the arena. They were cheering for him. The loser. They were cheering because he had refused to quit. Because he had fought until his body physically could not continue. Because he had demonstrated that quality the humans called heart. Zirveth stood up. His legs felt weak. "I must return to my vessel," he said. "I have seen enough." "You sure?" Jake asked. "We've got the post-fight interviews coming up. Some great soundbites usually." I am certain." Zirveth walked toward the exit. His remaining warriors followed in silence. None of them looked back at the screen. None of them spoke. When they reached the airlock connecting the two ships, Zirveth paused. He turned to face Katie, who had accompanied them. "Lieutenant Sullivan," he said slowly. "What you showed us tonight. This competition. Is this the extent of human violence? Is this as far as your species goes?" Katie's smile faded slightly. Her eyes met his. And for just a moment, he saw something ancient and terrible looking back at him. "No, Commander," she said softly. "This is what we do when we're being gentle. This is what we do to people we like. To people we respect. You asked to see how humans compete." She paused. The silence stretched between them like a blade. "You did not ask to see how we fight." Zirveth felt his 4 hearts stop beating simultaneously. For 3 long seconds, he experienced what must have been death. Then, his hearts restarted. And he stumbled through the airlock without another word. Behind him, he heard Katie Sullivan's voice, warm and friendly, and absolutely horrifying. "Thanks for watching with us, Commander. Come back anytime." The journey back to the Kelthari homeworld took 16 standard cycles. For most of that time, Commander Zirveth sat alone in his quarters, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. He had not spoken to his warriors since leaving the human vessel. They had not spoken to each other either. Each of them had retreated into their own spaces, their own silences, their own private horrors. The ship moved through space like a ghost, its crew going through the motions of duty without any of the pride that usually accompanied Kelthari military service. Sub-Commander Threlnok came to see him on the 12th cycle. He stood at the entrance to Zirveth's quarters for a long time before speaking. "I have been trying to understand," Threlnok said finally. "I have been reviewing the recordings, analyzing the combat techniques, studying the human reactions. I have been trying to find some explanation that makes sense. Have you found one?" "No." Threlnak's voice cracked. "I have found nothing. There is no rational explanation for what we witnessed. No species should behave the way humans behave. No intelligent creature should derive pleasure from self-destruction." Unquote. Zirveth nodded slowly. "And yet they do. And yet they do." They sat together in silence for a while. Two warriors who had seen horrors across 17 star systems, unable to process what they had witnessed in a viewing room aboard a human ship. "What will you tell the High Council?" Threlnok asked. "The truth. They will not believe us." "Then I will show them the recordings." Threlnok shuddered. "Must you? Some things should not be seen. Some knowledge is too dangerous to spread. The Council must understand what we are dealing with. They must know what these humans are capable of. If they make the wrong decision regarding Earth, if they choose to treat humans as another conquest." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The Kelthari homeworld appeared in the view screen on the 16th cycle. It was a beautiful world, purple and silver, with 3 moons orbiting its mass. The seat of an empire that spanned 17 star systems. The home of the greatest warriors in the known galaxy. Zirveth looked at it and felt something he had never felt before when returning home: vulnerability. The High Council chamber was vast and ancient, carved from the living stone of a mountain that had witnessed the rise of Kelthari civilization. The 5 council members sat on elevated thrones, their ceremonial armor gleaming in the torchlight, their 4 eyes fixed on Zirveth as he made his report. He spoke for 3 hours. He described everything: the small, soft-looking humans, with their hidden strength, the friendly smiles that concealed predator instincts, the cage where warriors fought voluntarily, the violence that was called entertainment, the children raised to celebrate bloodshed. The council listened in silence. When he finished, High Counselor Drothvol leaned forward. He was the oldest member of the council, a warrior who had led armies before Zirveth was born. "You are telling us," Drothvol said slowly, "that these humans harm each other for amusement. That they train their entire lives to enter a cage and destroy each other. That they consider this activity to be honorable and entertaining." "Yes, High Counselor. And their females participate in this savagery as well?" "Yes, High Counselor. And their young are taught to admire it. I witnessed a human child cheering as one fighter rendered another unconscious." "High Counselor." The child was wearing clothing that celebrated the victor. Drothvol sat back in his throne, his 4 eyes closed briefly. When they opened, they held something that Zirveth had never seen in them before: uncertainty. "Play the recordings," Drothvol commanded. Zirveth had prepared for this. He activated the display system, and the chamber was filled with images and sounds from that terrible evening. The council watched in growing horror as human beings tore each other apart for the pleasure of screaming crowds. 2 council members left the chamber before the recordings finished. One of them was later found in his quarters, refusing to eat, staring at the wall. He would never fully recover. When the recordings ended, the remaining council members sat in absolute silence. The torches flickered. The ancient stone walls seemed to press inward. "This is what they do for entertainment," Councillor Threnva said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "This is their idea of sport, of competition." "The human female said something to me as I departed," Zirveth said. "She said that what we witnessed was humans being gentle, being restrained. She said we had seen how they compete." He paused. The next words were difficult to speak. "She said we had not seen how they fight." Silence. Then Drothvol spoke. "What is your recommendation, Commander?" Zirveth took a deep breath. "I recommend immediate diplomatic outreach. I recommend proposing a mutual non-aggression treaty. I recommend establishing Earth and its surrounding systems as a protected zone that Kelthari forces will never enter. You recommend retreat. I recommend survival, High Counselor." Zirveth stood tall, meeting the ancient warrior's gaze. "We have conquered 17 star systems. We have defeated species that seemed invincible. But we defeated them because they fought to protect themselves. They fought because they had to." He thought of the human fighter with the broken arm, still standing, still waving his opponent forward. Humans fight because they want to. They seek out violence. They embrace pain. They have built entire industries around the act of destroying each other. And they do this for fun, for entertainment, for something they call glory. He took another breath. "High Counselor, I have led armies into battle. I have faced death countless times. I have never known fear. But when I watched those humans celebrate violence, when I saw their children cheering for bloodshed, When I looked into the eyes of that female human and saw what lived behind her smile, his voice dropped to a whisper. I was afraid. For the first time in my life, I understood what it means to be prey. The council deliberated for 6 hours. In the end, the decision was unanimous. The Kelthari Empire would send an ambassador to Earth with a proposal for eternal peace. The treaty would be generous. Favorable trade agreements, technology sharing, mutual defense pacts, everything the humans could want, offered freely and without conditions. Territorial expansion would continue, but in the opposite direction from human-occupied space. Any star system within 50 light-years of Earth would be declared off-limits to Kelthari military operations. The official reason given to the public was strategic reallocation of resources. Only the High Council and a handful of senior commanders knew the truth. The mighty Kelthari Empire, conquerors of 17 star systems, had been defeated by a single evening of human entertainment. When the human ambassador received the treaty proposal, she was confused. Captain Jake Morrison was even more confused. They had expected negotiations, demands, posturing. Instead, they received everything they could have asked for and more. What changed their minds? Jake asked Lieutenant Katie Sullivan. Katie checked the diplomatic communications. The only explanation offered was a single line that the translator struggled to interpret properly. Something about humans being magnificent and terrible in equal measure. She smiled and thought about that evening in the viewing room. About the aliens who had walked in with pride and walked out in silence. About the questions they had asked, with shaking voices. I think they finally understand us, she said. On the Kelthari homeworld, Commander Zirveth filed his final report and requested retirement from military service. His request was granted immediately. He had served the Empire with distinction for over 40 cycles. He had earned his rest. A young warrior asked him once, years later, why he had retired at the peak of his career. Why he had walked away from glory and conquest, and everything the Kelthari valued. Zirveth looked at the young warrior for a long moment. Then he answered, I have seen what humans call a competition. I have watched them destroy each other for entertainment. I have seen them break bones and spill blood, and still refuse to surrender. I have seen their children raised to worship violence. He turned away, his 4 eyes gazing at something far beyond the walls of the room. I do not ever want to see what they call a war. The young warrior had no response to that. Neither did anyone else.